We need to talk. Come here, come closer. I'm always bragging about my national awards in graphic design. It's on my website, it's on my Facebook. We get it, whatever. How do you even know that I'm competent at graphic design and not just ripping off other people? Why haven't I shown you guys tips or tricks or something you can learn from me about graphic design if I'm some national award-winning graphic designer? Well, today we're going to be talking about 3 ways to improve your graphic design from going from something like this to something like this. Let's jump into it. The number one most important thing in graphic design is cohesiveness. Now, you can nail your composition, you can nail your graphic elements, you can know all the tips and tricks, all that stuff, but if you do not have a cohesive flowing graphic that really complements the other parts of the graphic well to create one solid graphic, it's gonna feel like there's just one thing missing. There's just one thing that's keeping your graphic from being good to being great. So that is what we're gonna be diving into today. I'm gonna teach you 3 different ways that you can use in unison. You can use just one of them to create a more cohesive graphic, to kind of bring together all those crazy different parts, all those layers into a more cohesive, well put together graphic. So if we jump into Photoshop, here is just a simple little advertisement that I created just for the purpose of this video. Now, if we look at it, it is a good graphic. It's solid. There's not a lot of stuff going on, but it's simple. It gets the point across. I want people to contact me. So that part, the composition, the message, all that is rock solid. But it feels like there's just maybe something missing. There's something that is not clicking here. We need to add just a little bit more to kind of make it flow together and not look so just kind of flat. So the first tip we're going to be talking about is textures. Using textures is super easy, super simple, and it's a great way to kind of put all of your graphical elements under one roof, kind of create a common denominator so that stuff that maybe doesn't seem like it really fits can have that one thing that unites them, which would be the texture. Now, you can use these in a lot of different ways. You can use them on the whole graphic, you can use them on specific parts. It all kind of depends on what your graphic looks like, what you're going for. We'll take a look at both of those. We'll use it on just a specific part of this graphic, and then we'll kind of overlay the whole thing. So we're gonna start by doing more of a local specific texture here. We're gonna add it to this box with my website on it. So here's a plastic wrap texture. We'll go ahead and drag it right where we want it over the rectangle, and then we can just rename it, and we're gonna clip it to the rectangle. So there is the rectangle with the texture added, but we still want it to be cohesive, and now it looks like the DanteBohauer.com is just kind of floating above that texture. So what we're gonna do is drag it, copy it over the Dante Bohauer, and then we'll simply just invert it, Command I, and clip it to the name. So now what you have is the texture is both on the box and on the website. That box now pops a lot more. It draws your eyes to the part that I want the client to see, which is my website. Now we'll look at just putting a texture over the whole thing, bring everything together just using one texture. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. I have this grunge texture here. Let's go ahead and grab that. We'll resize it to about there. Now this is above everything in my document here. So we'll rename that, we'll invert it, and then we will just simply hit multiply. And as you can see now, it covers every bit of white in the document, but we also want it to cover everything that's black, so it looks like the texture overlays the entire thing. So we'll go ahead and Command J to duplicate it, and we'll invert that texture, and we'll go screen. And now, as you can see, if we zoom in here, the texture covers everything on the document, whether it's red, black, white, whatever. So that kind of brings, if we just go ahead and look at the before and afters of that, it kind of brings the whole graphic together just by simply overlaying a texture on top of the entire thing. So textures are a great way to kind of specifically adjust parts of your graphic or just overlay the whole thing so that it looks all uniform. Now let's talk about a way to kind of create that cohesiveness using depth and create a more realistic type feel in your graphic. Now that is through shadows and blurs. As you can see, we have my logo here in the back, but it kind of just looks like it's copy and pasted on there, which it is. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and disable this real quick just so we can click on this graphic, and we're gonna blur this out so it kind of looks like it's in the background, similar to what you would see if this was taken with a camera and this was the actual scene you were looking at. So first, we're gonna convert this to a smart object. Just right click, convert to smart object. That way we can change the amount of blur if we wanna go back and change it later. So then we'll go up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll just go about 13.4, whatever. Click OK, and then we will drop the opacity down to about 75%. Now that looks like it is actually behind me instead of just kind of like I'm right up against the signature. We can also do the same thing with this shape here to create a little bit more depth. We can go ahead and convert this group to a smart object, filter, blur, and we can do it just a bit less, maybe like 3.2, so that it still looks like it's behind me, but it's not as blurry as the signature, creating those multiple layers of depth here. Let's try it again with this blue one down here. We'll go convert to smart object, blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll do the same as this square here. So 3 pixels, and we'll drop this to about 50%. Maybe not, maybe 65. So that way there's a lot more depth. It looks a lot more real, as if I took the photo and that's what I was looking at. That is a great way to create more depth, and it's super simple to do. So now we'll talk the shadows part of this shadows and blur. Now that you have it blurred behind you, you want to add a shadow to it to make it actually look like it is behind you. So we'll go ahead and go right under here. We'll create a new layer and just call it shadow. And then we will maybe go 45% here for the brush, and we'll just kind of create a shadow on top of the square, like so. So now if we just turn that on and off, you can see the difference. Now it really, really looks real. If we zoom in on it and do a before and after again, it looks so much more realistic, so much more like it's supposed to be there, and it brings everything together. Now this helped me probably make the biggest jump I made in my graphic design. Was my designs were kind of flat. I didn't really know how to bring everything together, and using blurs and shadows to create a more realistic visual in my design really helped me kind of take that next step and opened up all these different ideas that I had for my design. So now you've learned a couple different ways to kind of create a more cohesive design. Now let's add a finishing touch. That is my last tip, which is colors/filters. So at the end of almost every design I do, I go up all the way to the top of my document. I go Command, Option, Shift, N, and then Command, Option, Shift, E. And that copy and pastes everything that's visible in my design and puts it on one layer. Now this is always a finishing touch thing for me. I'll name it filter. We'll convert this to a smart object so it doesn't change anything down here. It's just an overlay of the graphic on one layer. So now I want to bring the colors together. I want to really bring this graphic to life using a camera raw filter. Now this way I can kind of change and tweak the highlights, the shadows, the colors, how I want, so that it all flows together. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Let's go ahead and slap a camera raw filter on there. And if I just copy and paste my edits, as you can see, kind of ditched the contrast a little bit, up the clarity, added just a little more contrast in with the tone curve here. Maybe we can even bring these shadows to be a bit deeper. And then what I did in here is I took out the yellows here. I thought they were kind of distracting. Kind of brightened up the oranges for my skin tones. Kept the reds pretty saturated and desaturated the blues because I wanted the client to look more at the red parts, kind of the parts that are near where I want them to look at the graphic. So then if we just hit OK, take a look at the before, it's good, there's depth, there's texture, it fits well together, but it just needs a little bit of a vibrancy bump. It needs a little bit more color adjustments. Slap the filter on, and you can see my skin tones are brightened, the reds are brightened, the blues are subdued, and it just creates that more complete graphic. So I hope you guys can use these to take that jump, to take that next level in your graphic design. If you found this helpful, like, comment, subscribe, do all that jazz, and I'll see you guys in the next one.